Someone like to move? Councillor McRoby, thank you. Councillor Wallstein, thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Do we have any declarations of interest? There are none. Okay, so moving on to public forum, and welcome Mike Sweeney. So welcome to the chamber. If you'd like to just hop into the chair in front of you there, and if you just put the microphone on, it's just the button on the right. Yep, that's the one, and the floor is yours.
Well, I had asked to speak on item 6.2. Did you want me to make my remarks now or when you come to that item?
No, if you make them now, that'd be great.
Good. Well, if you'll refer to your agenda, this is about the proposal from Aquatech showing interest in purchasing the building which currently houses Scott's Brewery. And I felt it was important to point out that this isn't merely a commercial question, as it appears, but also a question of the loss of control which would occur if that passes from council ownership to private ownership. And since it's right in the middle of the Harbor District, which is an issue of great importance to both the council and to the public, I hope that it is not held in secrecy and that the other aspects of this are brought forward. It does not appear to me to be just a commercial issue. And I question as to why it is being held in secrecy, why this discussion is being held in secrecy. The reasons which are given in accordance with the Local Government Information Act are that there would be a prejudice or disadvantage to the council by this being held in public session. And it isn't immediately obvious as to why that would be the case. This isn't a competitive tender situation, nor are there any trade secrets involved. It seems to be a question of, well, the council gets income from the rent. There's been an offer to buy it. It seems like a fairly straightforward commercial question which could be held in the public without any disadvantage to the council. There is a routine practice by the council to put things into secrecy kind of automatically if it involves any commercial business. And that doesn't appear to be in conformance with the law, and I hope you will reconsider it. So along these lines, I've filed an official information request to know what the lease payment is from Aquatech and what the term of the lease is. And I'm looking forward to you reconsidering on this item today whether it should be held in secrecy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sweeney. What I can say is, we consider all of these things. We certainly considered this item as to whether we could hold the whole thing in public or not. It would disadvantage council and by extension the ratepayers if when we're looking at what the terms of a deal might be, if we held that in public and it became known to everyone. If we, for example, if we agreed to sell, in this case, they already own the building. This is the sale of the land underneath it. If we agreed to sell the land and we said, here's the minimum price to the chief executive and said, go away and negotiate the best you can, it really hinders our ability to negotiate or our chief executive's ability to negotiate when the public knows what the minimum price is that we're prepared to take. So there are commercial reasons. I absolutely accept that there's public interest in this and it's very much a public bit of land. But there are, around the negotiation points, there are reasons for having this in committee. The rules around meetings and what can be done as public excluded and not are very strict, and there needs to be, as you've pointed out, there needs to be consideration of those reasons. In this case, I think we have met that test. What we try and do is make it as transparent as possible, which is why there is a part of the discussion in public around what we're going to be talking about. So at least the public are aware of that. That didn't used to happen. So that's a greater transparency than there used to be. It used to be that the whole thing would just be in public excluded. There'd be a heading which the public would see, and that would be all. So hopefully that helps.
Well, if
it
reaches the point where a proposal is brought before the council to make the sale, would that be held under public session? After you've negotiated whatever terms and you've made a recommendation to council to sell or not to sell, would that be a public issue?
Normally not. Normally what would happen in that case would be that we set the minimum terms and ask the CE to go and negotiate. So at that stage, that's normally when we will have agreed, yes, we will sell it subject to meeting, you know, this minimum price or whatever it might be.
The council would say yes or no in secrecy.
In public excluded, we basically, there'll be some times where we actually, you know, there might be a wide variation around some of the negotiation and we might want it to come back for us to make a final decision. Other times we'll agree that subject to meeting minimums. Well,
see, that's the point that I hope you reconsider, not only in this case, but in other cases that arise, because at that point, as I said, you've got a larger issue as to the loss of control, potential loss of control over harbor land. And that should be an issue where the public at least knows what's going on and at least has an opportunity to provide input. And I can't see at that stage in the process where there'd be any reasonable argument that there would be a disadvantage or a prejudice to the council. You know, we're facing a situation right now, for instance, that, as you're all well aware, that the Labour government is trying to destroy local democracy. And I know you're going to resist that. And I'm looking forward to hearing your discussion about those issues like Three Waters and so on today. So while you're standing up for local democracy at that level, I hope you don't, you know, impinge upon it when it comes down to the grassroots here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tamandale, you just want to make a comment?
Yeah, just a quick one, just to say that the first part of the topic that has been put in public was purely for the likes of what we're seeing today, having you in front of us. I think it's really important. And I think I just want to make sure you're aware, we've all heard those comments and they are going to be taken into this discussion and totally take your points that you put forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in. And yeah, we are doing our best to try and make as much in public as possible, in spite of what some people might say. Okay, councillors, we now move on to item 4.1, my report for looking at the past 6 weeks and so looking forward as well. So just to comment further on that, there are comments that I've made around the future for local government reform and the Three Waters reform. It does seem to be changing, if not daily, then pretty much weekly at the moment. We're getting more information coming through. Just want to reiterate that basically we are going through a process, and I'll ask the Chief Executive to perhaps elaborate a little bit more during his report, his verbal report, just on exactly what we're doing at the moment around trying to get some reality around the financial numbers of whether we're in a large entity or whether we are out. There are a lot of details, and it really depends on I guess where people are at. I was in, as you may be aware, I was in Te Kuiti last week to talk about carbon forestry, but the topic came up around Three Waters, and there were a couple of operational people in there in the meeting. They were wondering, you know, if there isn't basically the entities are being set up, what happens around office space, computers and so forth. So we're very much at that operational level of trying to work out what transition looks like. For us, obviously, the big question is, are our ratepayers going to be better off or not? So we basically need to know, why does the Scottish Water Authority believe we need to spend $1.5 billion for our district to actually get up to the standards that the UK is at? And that is a very huge question. Basically, we're a council with a turnover of a bit over $50 million a year for all of the activities we do. To spend $1.5 billion over the next 30 years requires us to spend that $50 million every year for 30 years on water. It's a wee bit hard to understand. So we need to get some validation around the numbers so that we can talk to our community. At this stage, you know, if I had to make a decision today, I'd be saying no. We're just too far out. We don't have enough detail, and we shouldn't opt in. But we need to keep an open mind and get the facts, and then make the decision. Just moving to the local government conference. So I put a few photos in there, but didn't really talk about the MySpace tour that I went on, which is the Youth Trust in Melbourne, the Marlborough Youth Trust actually, and their centre for young people to go to. Some really cool things that they had in there, which made it much more interesting for young people to be in. We have our own space in Oamaru, which has got some pretty cool things, but this was very large. It moved into an ex-Mitre 10 building, so you can understand the scale. Things like a music studio, basketball court, dance studio, and so on, was all added different aspects to it. So a great place for young people to go. They could go and do their homework. They would get some help there. There was a bit of a cafe, and really pretty cool facility overall. Overall, I think the conference was well received by most attendees. It was deliberately very topical, and there was an opportunity to find out more about some of the aspects. Prime Minister made the announcements around Three Waters and the support package, or the bribe package, as some would say. I think it was a really good opportunity, and I'm just going to ask some of the attending councillors if they want to make any further comments. You will have seen one of the photos of Councillor Thompson, and demonstrating his hot air ability. There was one other photo I sent through, which was around the socialising, and I just asked Councillor Tavendale if you could just hold that one up. But there's always a great opportunity to network at these things, and this one didn't quite make it onto the report, but Councillor Thompson did enjoy some of the local produce of Marlborough, but also I think had a really good time actually connecting with a lot of other people in local government, but I'll let him elaborate on that one. That's probably more of a response back to you for some of your comments, Councillor Thompson, in your report. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was the comment that I made in my report about visiting the valley in Kenya, where all the old elephants go to die, was my first impression of the conference. I've never seen so many retired central government politicians who obviously still can't give up the gravy train. The fact I am working very hard to increase my capacity to hold air, simply because I think I'm going to struggle for breath under the weight of the bureaucratic bullshit, and the fact that people aren't brave enough to make hard decisions. And I thought that's what government and local government was about.
Councillor Hallalady, do you want to make comment on your experience?
Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm not sure I can top Councillor Thompson's comments this morning, but I think it was a really good opportunity because it was my first conference that I had been to, and one of the issues that I was really interested in is around housing, how we can look at enabling housing to try and provide opportunities for our community, especially in social and community emergency housing as well. So that was one of the things. And I'm also very conscious that we are going to have some very difficult, challenging conversations with our community around the whole Three Waters topic. And it's really important, like what our Mayor has mentioned, that we need to gather all the information, do our whole cost benefit analysis, and then we can liaise with our community and hear from you as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Councillor McRoby.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I enjoyed it as well. It was the first conference that I've been to as well. And I think the key one for me, which I've highlighted in my brief report with those photos, was that there absolutely was a desire by the minister to work with local government to make this Three Waters reform work. And I went into the conference thinking, oh, here we go, more rubbish and crap from central government. And I came away. Sorry, and I'm very pleased about that. So overall for me, I'm pleased I went and learnt a lot. Met quite a few people. I agree with Jim about the number of retired central government politicians that were there. There was a hell of a lot of them. But the photos that I've taken of the waste plant, which is one of the trips that I went on, unfortunately I didn't take any notes. It was very, very wet and it was just very hard to take any notes, but you'll get a feel for what their waste plant is like. And I thought it was very well resourced with all the various elements, and you've seen just some of the photos there. There's other photos that I've taken as well, but overall, as I said, a good conference and appreciated representing Waitaki at the conference. Really was. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Just on that comment around the retired central government politicians, there are a number of ministers who have become mayors, and almost without exception, I think, they actually talk about their new appreciation for local government, that it's not where old elephants go to die, and they're actually busier than when they were ministers, and certainly more connected to communities, which is something we hope they share with their ex-colleagues in Parliament as we talk about the reform of local government. Anyway, councillors, floor's open for any questions or comments.
Just wanted to mention on that youth space, that's been something that the Youth Council through their strategic planning sessions probably for the last 3 or 4 years have very much highlighted as something that they see as just not having to the extent that I'd like to see in Waitaki. So it'd be interesting to learn a little bit more and maybe even bring someone from there down to understand how they got a project off the ground, and give our young people some tools to sort of get an idea of what could be. Thought that was really interesting. And yeah, thanks for the updates on the 3. I don't know that the choice is going to be ours as much as we like to think it would be, but time will tell.
Councillor Kingham.
Can I congratulate you also on the Three Waters approach? And I mean, even really good article in the Omri Mail last week about answering some questions, and those questions are starting to be asked more and more, I notice, out in the community now. So thanks for that. Could you fill us in a little bit more on your trip to the North Island re-carbon farming? Are they in the same position as us, or could you just expand on that a little, please?
Yeah, sure thing. So I went up last Wednesday, and first of all, met with the Mayor of Aotearoa and a couple of councillors and staff from Waitomo District Council. Talked to them about the challenges we've had with carbon forestry and some of the big challenges there. Waitomo certainly in the midst of having farms bought up. I think there are 5 or 6 farms that have been bought up to be planted out in pine trees, and they're really feeling the effects of that. Aotearoa don't believe they've got any farms yet, but I think it's probably only a matter of time before that happens. That was followed by a public meeting hosted by Fed Farmers in Te Kuiti, and there was probably about 70 or 80 people there. Fed Farmers turned it into, rather than just being an anti-carbon forestry meeting, it was more about what are the opportunities on farms for some aspects of forestry or tree planting and so forth, which was actually a really good positive aspect or contrast to carbon forestry. So they had a gentleman talking just around more around the financial models around some forestry, so smaller amounts, but also talking about non-pine tree species. And then we had William Beetham from Wairarapa, who talked about what they've done on their farm, which has been some pretty interesting stuff on just planting trees, not as forests, but as just as part of an amenity type planting for, where stock can still graze around them and so on, but planting trees that have got specific purposes and add value that way. And certainly looking at rotational harvesting of these things so that you don't have clear felling in any area. So there were some good perspectives there. I then went on after those two relatively positive ones and talked about our experiences. And as I put it, the impact on rural communities is quite negative. And I don't know that any of the metros would appreciate unless they had parts of their cities being planted out in pine tree forests, and I just can't see that happening. So it's very much a situation where the burden's falling on rural communities and not the metropolitan areas, as we have these. Quite, I think everyone's on board with needing to plant more trees, but it's that whole right tree in the right place argument, and trying to get the right scale, rather than like with Hazeldean, where you've got 1,500 hectares that's just going to be planted out in pine trees, which aren't going to be managed particularly well, and cause a lot of problems for that community, and the loss of production off that land, the loss of work for people involved in the agricultural sector. So hopefully that helps. Okay, anyone else? Well, good. Someone like to move, receive the report. Councillor Thompson, second Councillor Tavendale. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against, that's carried. Now move on to Mr. Palmley's report. So it's just a verbal one, because when we had to write our reports, he would have only been here for 2 weeks, and we felt probably not really fair given 2 weeks that he needs to write a full report on. So welcome you, Alex, and look forward to your verbal update.
Tēnā koutou, and as this is my first council meeting, thank you for appointing me as your chief executive. It's a great privilege to be here, and I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, staff, and the members of the community I've met so far for the warm welcome to me and my family. And in particular, I'd like to thank local iwi for the welcome that they gave to my family and me before I started here. Moving your life from one side of the world to the other is challenging at the best of times, but doing it during a global pandemic is an even bigger challenge, as we discovered. But your welcome has made it a little easier, I should say. But if anyone can influence global shipping companies to get my worldly goods out of Central America, I'd be very grateful. The last 3 weeks has been extremely busy, and obviously we covered the LGNZ conference, which was great to go to the majority of that before I started and get an understanding of some of the issues and challenges facing local government and this council. It's clear there's a lot of potential change in the offering for local councils in New Zealand, and as a result for our communities and what we deliver to, for and with them. And we don't understand fully the shape of this yet or its implications. So there's much more to be defined and understood, and a lot more discussions to be had with central government in particular. But it's pleasing to be part of a council that is openly exploring what those opportunities might be, but being cautious also on what those, that we're cited on what those risks are that might have a negative effect on our communities. So I'm looking forward to working with councillors and staff to ensure that we make the case for localism in whatever changes are that go ahead, because it's proven that the big issues we face both nationally and locally can only be resolved in a sustainable way by ensuring localism is at the heart of the solution. You invited me to say a bit more on Three Waters, which is the pressing piece of work really in terms of local government reform that we face at the moment. And we're in a period of what government calls engagement at the moment, but it's cautious to say it's not consultation. And so we're doing a lot of work around what are the implications of the proposal that's on the table at the moment. The Mayor mentioned that the proposal is based on a model, and all models have flaws within them, and we're working to understand those. A lot of the assumptions are based on what happened in Scotland, and clearly we're not Scotland, and we need to highlight how both the South Island and our local community have differences and what that actually means in terms of the proposal. So we'll be doing a lot more work and want to bring something back to Council in terms of the analysis of what the potential implications are. Some of that is around the model and the finances, but we want to look at it more in the round as well in terms of the implications for services going forward, the finance and funding of this council and what that means more widely therefore for other services, the workforce, in the long term, but also more in the immediate term in terms of any transition if this was to go ahead. And also in terms of the social and economic impact as well. Water is a big part of what we do, and if it was to go, it would have a big impact in terms of the organisation, its focus, its capability and its resources. And so my job is working with the team and drawing on the resources that have been made available to us to ensure that you as a council are well sighted on that and the implications and are able to take a position on that going forward. Turning to other things, I think, I mentioned already that change in local government means a change for staff of the council, and often when a new chief executive comes in, people are nervously waiting to see what it means and what this new broom will bring. Whilst I've only just started in the role, I've been engaging with a number of staff, but there's a lot more conversations I want to have to get an understanding of how the organisation works. But I think I've been overwhelmed by how positive people are about how we might change and adapt as an organisation so that we can get better outcomes for the communities of Waitaki. And I think it's clear that the majority of staff, that is what their focus is on, working for you, the council, to ensure that we can move forward and get better outcomes, whatever the changes are that lie ahead. And also getting out and about, it is great to meet lots of members of the communities that we serve. And a lot more to do on that over the next few weeks. But I think I've been struck by a number of things really, and some of the things I've attended. So the Infometrics event with Brad Olson that was in my first week really highlighted some of the local and national bright spots of our economy, but also some real opportunities for us and some risks and challenges moving forward as we deal with some of the changes in the economy forced by the global pandemic, and also some local changes that are in the offing as well. Meeting some of our local businesses and farmers in the past couple of weeks has given further insight into the local economy. And so I'm really looking forward to working with the business community and partners and yourselves to see how we can actually build a strong and sustainable and resilient local economy and deal with those challenges we face, including the tourism sector. And so I've already, in starting to develop the KPIs, which will come forward to council in due course, committed that we'll have a good look at our approach to developing the economy and tourism so that it can really underpin how we improve quality of life more generally within Waitaki. Also, I think in my first week, it was really moving to be able to spend some of my time at the Family Harm Conference organised by our community development team. And I believe ensuring safe and stable families is really important in ensuring that we have strong communities and that every child gets a good start in life. Whilst we've clearly got a lot of work to do here, we're building on a really firm platform that's already been put in place. And I think there's real opportunities in whatever the reform that comes ahead to local government to build on this work further so we can better support our communities and our young people. And touching on that, it was great to attend the Youth Council meeting, which was followed by a presentation by our aspiring young leaders, and I know a number of councillors were there. And it's great that we have local young people who are already ready to step up and show leadership on the local issues and challenges we face, and some of the national issues as well. And an important role for the council, I think, as a community leader, ensuring that working with others, we provide better opportunities for our local young people and from all of our communities. So I'm looking forward to working with you on that and how we do that going forward. So just to finish off before I open up to questions or comments, whilst there are clearly changes and challenges ahead for us as a council and more generally for local government and the area that we serve and the communities we serve, I'm looking forward to working with all of you and the Mayor and the staff and our partners and communities out there and dealing with these challenges and realising the opportunities. I think we've got a really good base to build on, but there is much work to do, which I'm looking forward to taking forward with you.
Thank you, Alex. And I have to say 3 and a bit weeks down. Yeah, I'm very much enjoying working with you, and I appreciate the very amicable nature that you bring to discussions. And yeah, I think that what I've seen so far, staff are responding well to that, and I think councillors probably agree that we're certainly enjoying that as well as we get to know you better. So thank you for that. Councillors, any questions or comments? No, it was for a verbal update. It was a very thorough one, and thank you very much for that. I think it does show just how well you are picking up on things, and as we continue to get around the traps and acquaint you with different organisations, businesses, people in their community, I think that will only grow. So, yeah, thank you very much for that. Someone would like to move, we received that report. Councillor McRovey, Councillor Holding, seconded that. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against, carried. Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 5.1, the Waitaki Indoor Sports and Event Centre business case. I'll just welcome forward Mr. Paul Hope, Mr. Eric Van der Speck, and we also have Kevin Malcolm, Adair Craig and Deirdre Senior, who are representing the Friends of the Sports and Event Centre. So welcome to you all. And we'll just hand over to Mr. Hope to start things off. We'll also have Helen Ramsey join us from Morrison Lowe, so she's joining us online.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this is the first couple of decisions in what will be a series of decisions in relation to the proposed sports and event centre. I mean, this item was the main focus of the engagement in relation to the long-term plan. The very wide level of support in the community for this proposal was demonstrated by, I think, not only the people supporting the minimum funding level, but almost a third supporting the highest funding level that we talked about in the long-term plan. So to get to sort of a cumulative 80% support in the community for an idea is very unusual and hard to do. So I think it just does demonstrate the level of support that is out there. It's further demonstrated by I think having a community-based organisation promoting this as well, and really supporting it. So, two things to consider, which I think Mr. Van der Speck will talk in more detail. One is again at a very high level, and the other is very much the first functional decision, which is about location, and then undertaking some steps under the Reserves Act and Resource Management Act to actually get some approvals in place so that we can then start pursuing funding. So yeah, it's hopefully a reasonably straightforward couple of decisions to make. But Mr. Van der Speck, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, councillors. As Paul has indicated, this is, I guess, the next stage of what's been a 3-year process when we started with Sport Otago, who developed the feasibility study for the event centre. Obviously, Paul's referred to what we did through the LTP process. The next step was to develop this business case, which will be used for funding applications to lotteries and other agencies. So it's a necessary part of that. Essentially, the business case has concluded that there will be a number of benefits to the community, both in terms of social wellbeing, economic wellbeing, and for our sporting fraternity. It's identified that the preferred location is behind the grandstand, between the grandstand and Taylor Street at Centennial Park. And that was chosen from a short list of locations that were identified through the feasibility study, which did quite a thorough assessment of I think, over 20 sites around Waitaki, and has identified the estimated construction cost in today's dollars is about $24 million. That will increase over time, obviously, as we work towards the construction, which is estimated to take place in the next 3 to 4 years. Annual operating costs for the event centre once we have constructed it, and that includes the servicing of council's loans, is estimated to be around $545,000 to the ratepayer. I guess that's about it in summary. I guess if you're happy, I'll pass it over to the friends if they want to speak about, I guess, their involvement and their interest and passion and what they've been doing.
Yeah, great to have an update on where things are at.
Yeah, good morning and thanks for the opportunity. So the Waitaki Event Centre Trust, we are flat stick into the fundraising part of this venture. We are meeting a very, very positive public. Our initial stages, look, our complete focus is making sure that we are articulating the pillars that the Waitaki is all about, and certainly being the very best place to be and giving our youth the absolute best opportunities, but to give our whole community the best opportunity. So we're not straying from that fact, and that's part of our mantra going forward. We are, yeah, look, we're going on very well. We've got we're now an incorporated society. Just can't recall the numbers straight off hand, but you'll get it tattooed on me later. So if it's referred, it'll be there beside my PIN number if you can't get them. We're well underway in getting our charitable status. So that's well underway, but that just takes time. So we will have that imminently. So our funding plan is going well. Initially, we are hitting our corporate partners throughout the community. We're keeping very much locally based, and we're getting exceptionally good response. And we would hope and very confident that we'll have some very exciting news by the end of this month at the very latest. We would hope to sell that to our local papers if they could hear that somewhere. So we will have a very good story to come to print and back to the council within the next couple of weeks. Our aim still is to have the bulk of our, you understand we have a benefactor that is providing $5 million, providing we can match that. We are very confident that we'll have that matched towards the end of September, or certainly into October with some stuff that we've got going on at the moment. So that's awesome. At that stage, we'll then attack the philanthropic trusts, the community trust, lotto and lotteries and the likes of that. We believe we need to have that good community money first. And then once we've done that, or at that same time, end of September, when we announce exactly what we have then, we will be then having our push within our community. At this stage, we haven't gone out to our families, to our mum and dad, to the people within the community, because we believe we need to have that big bulk of that money first to show everyone that this is actually happening. We know it's going to happen, but we just think we need to tick that off before we start going to the mum and dad investors. So very excited, very positive, and we've just got to balance when we're offering things. Only one person can get caught one, although we might have a multiple deal with a lot of money that can just keep buying it. But in reality, we've got to be very careful and very balanced that we're getting the best support we can. So the process is probably just a wee bit slower than I'd hope, but it's going in a very, very positive direction. Welcome to take questions.
Thank you very much. And yeah, it's great having your team there doing the job that you're doing. I think I'm still winning though against Deirdre as to numbers of letters of support actually received. So bit of a challenge going on there. But you know, as we get out and about, you know, the number of positive comments and so on are certainly, you know, making the whole situation not very good at the moment. And being able to pass on any leads to you is, you know, I think that's a great opportunity to be able to have you go and do that job. So thank you to all of the members of the trust doing that work. Right, councillors, any questions for the friends of the event centre? Okay. Oh, Councillor Holding.
Yeah. Hey, thank you for coming along today. I'll just not more of a comment than a question. Exciting stuff with what's happening. I know it's all happening fast, but I think as of the representative on the existing community rec centre, it would be good to have that conversation about the future for them. If we could get together as a council and the trust, just to see what we can solve for that moving forward. I know there's ideas that some sports could go there, but just if we could get some communication with them going around about that, would be good.
if I can just reply to, that's all right. If I can just reply to that, Councillor, I actually met with a member of the Trust, Waitaki Girls Board, and the principal yesterday to initiate that. So that member of the Trust is going to come back to the Rec Centre Trust and start those conversations. So that is part of the process.
And we'd be very happy to be at the next meeting of that trust if need be, whatever meeting suits, no problem.
Yeah, through the chair. Kevin, page 25 under policy and plan considerations. Do you envisage problems or delays in applying for resource consent? Yeah, there's zero progress.
I could let this, I don't envisage a problem. It's just a timing thing that's a wee bit annoying, but I don't envisage a problem.
And it's really something that Eric's dealing with, so I'll just ask him to make a comment.
Yeah, if I may, there's two things we need to do, one of which is the Reserves Act requirements, which requires us to publicly notify our intention to use that site, given it's a large change to the existing sporting complex. Given the submissions we had through the LTP process and the support we've got from the sporting groups, I'm not anticipating significant concern over the site. We have having conversations with the neighbours across the road. They are by and large very, very supportive. In fact, they have concerns at the moment with parking for the netball courts on Saturdays, and they actually see the netball activity going indoors with a new car park as actually being a positive thing for their neighbourhood.
Yeah, it's certainly one of those challenges at the moment with that area that you've got junior rugby, you've got junior netball all happening at the same time, and parents and their kids all in vehicles, yeah, they're all taking up a lot of room. Whereas the intention is that you won't need to have those things necessarily all at the same time. You can actually structure some of the sport so that it's during weekday evenings and so forth. So plus the provision of another 80 or 150 car parks, depending on what we end up with on that side of things as well. You've got another question, Councillor?
Yeah, through the chair to Eric. I don't know whether I got it correctly, but you mentioned operational costs going forward of 540k per annum. Is that that's not including any cost recovery that you might gain from conferences or commercial events, blah, blah, blah?
To you, Mr. Chair, that's after cost recovery from users and any conferences.
Okay.
Do we want to ask Helen to make any comment on that? I'm just not sure when she to bring her in, but I think possibly now might be a good opportunity. So Helen, yes. Welcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
If you want to just cover off the business case, not the whole thing, obviously, but the key points that you want to make on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. So, I mean, I guess the business case primarily builds on work that was previously done by Sports Otago and the council. Talking to the costs, obviously the construction, it's our best assessment of costs at the moment, both the construction costs and the operating costs and revenue. So we looked at the costs for operating costs for other facilities, as well as these New Zealand guidelines that we used. Obviously, construction costs is our best assessment at this point in time. There is, inflation. There's a lot of talk about inflation. There's a tight labour market and supply chain issues with materials. So, we've tried to provide a balanced view, and I guess primarily the operating costs in there are used to compare the different models as well. I guess the primary purpose of the business case is to present the case for change and need for the facility. And there is there's a strong case for change over the status quo. And the business case presents our preferred, after going through all of the options assessment, our preferred option, which is the six-court facility, and with the preferred location being behind the grandstand, and for a number of reasons that have already been raised, around creating that sports hub being able to expand, having good ground conditions, and good ability to provide additional parking in that area. So, yeah, that's, I guess the other key point is around the procurement strategy. So while fundraising is a key activity for now, also we're talking the business case around our recommended procurement approach being a design build approach, and that was based on a comparison of recent projects undertaken by Waitaki District Council and Selwyn District Council. And the working group went and viewed a number of facilities. So the design build approach helps you just to constrain the cost. So the business case looks at what the risks are, and a key risk for this project is cost escalation and trying to keep the facility within scope. So that's, you know, our recommendation around there is to do that design build approach.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we'll just carry on with questions. Councillor Tavendale.
I just want to sort of point out it's been a really wet winter, and we've had our poor netball players that have spent probably half the season not playing. So it is really cool to see this, and I love the enthusiasm that we're getting from the Friends group that are out there knocking on doors and probably asking a lot of awkward questions, but it's working and it's fantastic to see. Just talking about where it is, I think the sports hub thing, from my point of view, really works, and it encourages sports to work together a lot more, and to I think the utilisation or potential utilisation of, you know, less admin, less everything else when all these groups can work together is really big. So keeping that in one place is really cool. So just want to say that you know, I don't think that the business case came up with anything we weren't aware of. I think that the position we're looking at is the best position. And I don't have any other questions other than that, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, it was certainly a good response from neighbours. That was the main concern. There are probably 3 neighbours most affected, and they certainly saw the positives in it, which was very helpful. And I think, yeah, as far as the business case goes, you're right. I don't think it raised anything we weren't expecting. One of the things is to keep working on how to minimise council's financial input, because the lower we can keep that, and whether it comes from other sources other than rates. You know, we're saying up to $1 million at the moment coming from resource, the RMA Reserves Fund, sorry. That's helping to keep that cost down. If we can save even more money, that means that the ongoing costs will be lower and the fees will be lower. So getting that mixture of, you know, really good use at you know, an affordable price for the community is really important. So any councillors, any questions? Councillor Wallstein and Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kirkshire. Yeah, I'm just very pleased to see in the Morrison Low report the 6-court indoor facility, where they state many others have been built too small. Can I just ask for the people who went around the tour of the other facilities, is 6 courts, how does that compare to Waimakariri and the other ones you went to, Ashburton and even Waimati, our closest neighbour, as far as the size they've built?
So the Selwyn one was an 8-court facility, and the Ashburton one was 4. And Ashburton, from memory, is 5 years old, and they've already identified that it's too small for their current needs.
Selwyn wants 10.
Oh, right. Well, I think comparing the size, and thank you for the response. Comparing the size, I think the 6 should be pretty good for Waitaki, and I'm pleased it's being built adequate size, not being under-spec'd from the start. So well done.
The Waimakariri one opens this Sunday, I believe. We have an invite to it. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get along to that, but it'll be interesting to see. Was it 4 courts or 6 courts? I don't think it was that. I don't think it was that large.
Yeah, I can speak to that. The Waimakariri. Sorry, the Waimakaru one I think is 4, and it's used more as a that was significantly more expensive than the Rolleston one, which was quite a bit larger. The Rolleston one is an 8-court facility. That was primarily due to the procurement approach, but it also has a whole lot of spectator areas upstairs, and I guess it's in the middle of outdoor courts as well. So it was, I guess the design spec for it, the concept was quite different. But the Rolleston one is, that was one of the difficulties in trying to determine the cost to compare different options, because there was quite a significant cost, which on the surface didn't. I guess that's where the important thing is to just consider what you're actually wanting to achieve out of the facility and focus on the core functions that it needs to provide. You can spend a lot of money on making a structure look attractive that doesn't necessarily, which adds costs. So I guess the focus on core features and what it's required is the best way forward.
Yeah, I think certainly looking at the Rolleston one, they've achieved the good balance, I think, overall, of getting something that does look good and works very well. So it's been very helpful getting around, looking at some of these different facilities and seeing what works and what doesn't. The Rolleston one is aimed more solely at sports rather than any event side of things. So we're wanting something that's a wee bit different in some respects to that. But I think the main lesson is you can't have too much storage space, and if you've got the other areas, the useful areas around meetings and so forth, they're all very helpful as well. Councillor Williams.
Thanks. Just a couple of more operational questions. I just noticed on page 24, you talk about the preliminary ground investigations confirm it not being a closed landfill. But there's been indications that site potentially previously was. Am I reading that correctly? I just want to see how technical those tests have been so far. I mean, how confident are we that that's not going to come up after we've gone through the process of getting, consent, etc.
I can speak to that. So we specifically had some specialist geotechnical support. Sorry, Eric. To verify that, because so the area towards the back, closer to the Excelsior's clubs rooms, that was a proposed location, and that definitely had strong indications that there was a closed landfill in that area, which is why when we looked at the whole of Centennial Park, the preferred location is behind the grandstand. So that was some ground penetrating radar surveys were undertaken so that we could see what was below the surface. And that also shows up where there's underground surfaces. So we're pretty confident that the preferred site is suitable for building.
Cool, thanks. And just one more question. Just for, there's a bit of a push during the report talking about that, of course, as we all know, that we're building in the future, so inflation will push costs up. I'm just wondering why we haven't taken the stance a little bit along the lines of that we know we're building in the future and we know that inflation is going to be involved, so why aren't we aiming towards a budget and that involves inflation being taken into account already?
To you, Mr. Chair. We are targeting $30 million as far as our fundraising as our budget at this stage. It's easy to talk in current terms because there is factual information around it. There was so much variation potentially as far as the cost of materials, the inflation, the labour market, a lot of competition for resources with the Dunedin Hospital and that it's pure speculation as to what the inflation is going to be over the next 3 or 4 years.
Indeed, just replying to that, I mean, we're all just aware of the risk that things get out of control and we use inflation as an excuse. So as long as we're being conscious of that fact, which of course we are, it's good to see.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, that's one of the key reasons why the design build approach is recommended. Obviously going out to the market and saying, well, here's our budget, what can you build us within that? And then following that, obviously, you've got a go, no-go decision to make as far as does it actually meet our requirements or do we have to actually go back and redo our business case?
Can I just say on the fundraising side, we're very confident of the $24 million that the people that we've used to establish that fee are right within that market, understand that market very well. We've always said 30 million, which does allow for that, and that's our fundraising target. So we're very we've been doing a lot of work as well as we've been going around with people in that supply market that are looking very hard at ways to ensure that we do meet budget. So no matter what way we actually finally decide to build it, we've got a lot of very good public support to make sure that the costs are contained, and whether we've just got to borrow some gear for the next 50 years may be an option. So, but the aim is to get there within that 30 million. Well, it's not an aim, it's a goal, and we'll make sure we achieve it for you.
Councillor McGravey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, it's probably a question for you, Helen. We often hear that councils build facilities, and there's probably plenty of examples around the country, that in 10 years' time, or even sooner than that, are outgrowing their requirements. What's your view on this facility in terms of when it may have to be expanded and when it may outgrow its current planned purpose or usage, such as, and I'm comparing it to a recent Wanaka pool build that was completed a few years ago, not that many years ago, where it's already outgrown its usage, and that was 8 lanes, 25 metres. So what's your view on this one in terms of that with our population growth and so on? Thank you.
Yeah, look, I guess that's why we, within the business case, we did look at a number of different size facilities and looked at what was used, elsewhere. And I guess that's where we've fixed, we got to the 6-court facility. Clearly the ones which are more like a 4-court would be too small and not meet your requirements. But we're, from, it's a bit of crystal ball gazing, but, we also referred to the guidelines around recreational sports development. So, I guess we've reviewed as much information as possible and looked around at what other councils have built in the past and where those are at. So, we're reasonably confident that the 6-court facility will meet your needs. And I guess that's another reason for the preferred site, is it does give you room to be able to expand the facility if you need to.
So what I'm hearing is that you're quite confident that this won't outrun its current build usage in the next 10 years, or have you not been able to calculate that?
Well, we haven't looked at a particular time frame around 10 years or not. What we've looked at is potential users and use for the court. What we're trying to do here is also cater for to attract events outside of just sports itself. So, the idea is to have multi-purposes areas that can be used for a variety of different programs as well. So, but yeah, our assessment at this, it's our best assessment at this point in time.
Okay, look, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it.
I think, you could always build bigger and make sure you are future-proofing things, but it's trying to get the balance. Reality is we'll have 6 courts for our community, which, if we're working in conjunction with the rec centre, that provides more space there. And obviously in the past, the schools, the high schools, Gibbons and Waitaki Boys, have their courts as well. So we still have those options. Essentially what we're doing is going from 4 courts to something that's more like 10 because of the overall size of these things. And, if you look at Rolleston, they've got 8 courts in, their immediate population is 16,000, but the Selwyn is, I think, the fastest or second fastest growing district in New Zealand. And so, we're pro rata, I think, will be much better off as far as the number of courts per capita. Councillor Thompson.
With your leave, Mr Mayor, I'm prepared to test the will of the room and move that council adopts option 1.
Let me just get back to the agenda, just on the other report. So the recommendation is the one that follows option 1, I think. So the council approves the Waitaki Indoor Sports and Events Centre business case, and 2 agrees to consider that the preferred site for the Indoor Sports and Events Centre is the rear of the grandstand at Centennial Park, subject to completing the required processes under the Reserves Act and obtaining resource consent. So you're moving that?
Correct.
Okay. Second, Councillor Deputy Mayor Tabendale. Thank you. And any further comments on that? Councillor Percival? No? Okay. Councillor Kingham.
Yeah, look, this is really exciting, I think, that we've got to this point. There's going to be further steps. I appreciate that, but I think it's really good to settle on a site, settle on a size, and I'm really enjoying what I'm hearing from your group about the positiveness. And I think overall, and even with long-term plan, when we asked the question, overall it was a really pretty positive reply. So let's go with it and do it. Great.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Nothing quite like having a headline in the local paper that says that this project's on the back burner, where I was intending to mean for the next 3 to 6 months, but it certainly galvanised people into action, and I think it's progressing well. So a big thank you to the media for their contribution towards that. And I'm not sure whether, Kevin, whether you've got Allied Press down on your list, but you need to make sure that they are. Yeah, you have. That's great. Okay, if there's no...
Any program says they're on the list.
Excellent. Okay, if there's no other comments, I'll put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And those against, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks to Helen and to friends of the event centre for coming along. Appreciate it. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Okay, councillors, now moving on to item 5.2 on page 26. Item on Forrester Heights. And we have Mr. Hope still with us on this agenda item, and Josh Rendell joining us, and Renee Julius, property manager, also joining us. So, Mr. Hope, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this item is really in response to a number of inquiries from the wider public, I suppose you could call it, really about what, which has prompted the question of what is council's intention in relation to Forrester Heights. And so prior to doing a significant amount of work on it, it was decided we needed to get this in front of council to get direction as to where they would like to go. There are sort of 3 options in the report, but the recommendation is that we actually start an engagement process, because commitments have been made in the past about engaging with the public in terms of how Forrester Heights could best be utilised. And yeah, so it's really getting your decision as to whether we start this engagement process versus probably just the status quo, which is do nothing and just wait for another period of time before any serious amount of work is done in terms of engagement and deciding what is the best use of this piece of land. So not sure the others want to add anything else at the moment. Probably not. I think probably better responding to questions before we have the substantive discussion. So thank you.
All right, councillors, do you have any questions? No? Councillor Tabendale.
Probably just a question for staff. Just want to get an understanding of your workload and how this fits into that.
I mean, that's why we came here. If council sees this as a priority and an urgent need, then we would consider that, make an estimate of the time, and then communicate that back to you about what other matters may need to be deferred or be less urgent. I mean, yeah, this wasn't really anticipated when we were planning the workload for the year. But if it's a priority of council, then it becomes a priority of officers.
If I can respond, I guess from my point of view, it's hard to say if it's a priority if I don't understand what I'm forcing you guys to push down the line.
I mean, like there was a significant workload outlined in the long-term plan. The thing, I think Mrs. Julius may need to chip into this one, but I mean, it's advancing through the projects in the harbour itself. There are significant issues in relation to the housing area that could use officer time. It's tricky. The other thing is, what is the time frame that you need this done? If it's an extended time frame, then that makes it a lot easier. So I can't give an absolute answer. I mean, that's just not possible.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, anything else? Councillor Thompson.
Can I just ask a question round that, and not, I don't expect an answer to this question, but what is the value of the land? Because if we're going to engage with the community, I'd like to be able to say to them that if the council sold this, there would be X amount of money to be spent back on other projects, as against, do we keep it and develop as a reserve type space, or what do we do? Because no one's actually at this stage quantified what its commercial value is as against its recreational.
It's going to be difficult to quantify, and the market's going to determine that. There isn't any like land that a valuer could hang their hat on and give us a value. So it will be as the market decides at the time.
I think if we were to go down that path, then we'd want to see a good return from it financially. It's not about just selling it off for any price. I would certainly want us, if we were selling it, if that was the decision ultimately, then we want to realise something that's actually going to help appreciably in some other area. We've got a lot of pressure with the long-term plan with large rate increases. We've got a fairly aspirational long-term plan around all the things we want to do, and there's a lot of infrastructural work that's being done, which is the main reason for the increases that we've got. But there's also a lot of other work. I don't think we're actually doing justice to our recreational reserves that we have got and that we're managing. Some of the walkways and so on definitely could be better, and there's an opportunity to perhaps put some funding into that, as well as the other benefits that might come with selling. Equally, it might be that we decide this should actually be extended as a reserve. But I think it is time to stop kicking that can down the road and make a decision one way or the other. And this is going to be the opportunity to do that. We've been given some recommendations there. And I think if we were to move those recommendations, the one I'd want to take off the table is that the council develop the land on its own as previously planned. I think that ends up being a discussion around risk with the community it's not a risk that we around this table would be keen to take on. And I think that becomes then the distraction around around that type of development. So that would be my suggestion, is that we do take that off the table and have one less option in there, which would be that one. So any other questions or comments?
Sorry, if I can just add in, I think if we do follow along the direction that's set out in the recommendations, I think one of the key things that we would need to be clear about, that retaining it in its current state or converting it into reserve, these are maintaining it in the current state is definitely the lowest cost option. But to actually turn that into a reserve that's usable and attractive and everything else, that will be a significant undertaking, and that's probably a cost we can estimate pretty well, because we're trying to develop Cape Wonbrow, and that's a large area. To have tracks, to have it well planted, to have it well maintained, they are not cheap options. And I think we need to get that probably into the public arena as well as the other options. So look, it's not, if you're going to retain it, going to turn it into something, there's a significant investment in there, and the returns, there are no financial returns. They are all returns in other aspects. So that's probably going to get down to where the big choice is how much do you want to invest in this as a alternate use versus the potential range of returns if you do something else with it. And also, it will be useful to clarify that it's only a small piece of probably it's only part of the piece that people can see from the town. It's not the whole, probably, clarify that understanding, clarify that it is freehold, therefore it is a council decision about what can be done with it. There's no encumbrances, there's no other conditions. It's like, what's the best use of this to meet long-term community needs? So I think that will be a useful conversation to have.
Councillor McRovey.
Look, just a quick question, Mayor. Given your comments regarding point 7 on number 2A, what about number 6? Seek partners for a joint venture in developing the land. Are we sure we want to perhaps consider that at this point, or should that come off the table as well?
It's really a decision for us to make today, or let that one run its course and see where it goes to. I mean, that is de-risking to a reasonable degree that type of aspect. I think when you're looking at what the returns will be, that is one where I think it gives a return that's quite significantly greater than just develop only, just sell only. And, it's less risky than the full develop it ourselves scenario if you've got experienced partner that's working with you. So it becomes a more useful comparison compared to option 7. Mr. Hope.
Yeah, and the other reason why that was included, it does allow council to have a far greater influence on, I suppose, the outcome of the development and the shape of it by being sort of actively involved rather than perhaps trying to put conditions on titles and being a bit more doing it by other means. This would be very much having a very strong influence on the nature of the development, its outcome, its view, everything else that perhaps are other concerns that have been expressed in the community.
Councillor Wallstein.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Kircher. I'd like to support Mayor Kircher's comments before. I think in my whole time on council, this has been the elephant in the room. It's been sort of lurking in the back. It's been avoided and skirted around and never actually, the matter's never been concluded. So I agree entirely with Mayor Kircher. It's time this matter was dealt with once and for all. So and I agree with him in terms of removing clause 2A7 in terms of de-risking the project, but keeping 2A number 6 in. And given that, I'd like to indicate my intention to move the resolution's recommendations, excluding number 7.
Okay, so notice the motion. Do we have any other questions first of all? Councillor Percival.
Quite difficult to overview this one. In June, you told us that our costs to date were around about 450,000 with all the work that had been done on it, etc. If it was incorporated back into the Cape development per se, as you know, the reserve, what would our costs, how would our costs be in that factor? I mean, because I don't actually support the sale or disposal of Forest Heights. So if it was back in our ongoing costs, would they be incorporated with the whole development, and how would they be? I mean, 450,000 is a lot of money to have spent so far. I don't even know what I'm actually asking here, but just a comment on that.
Can someone cobble the question out of that? Okay.
I mean, the question is, what do you do with that cost? I mean, that's sitting as part of a loan at the moment because it was anticipated, you know, this was seen as the original attempt with this was a commercial property development. Therefore, the cost of that development should fund any cost to date. If council goes another route, that cost would need to then be reflected and funded by however you chose to reflect whatever you've chosen to do with that land. So if it was turned into a reserve, it would need to be funded by RMA contributions or rates.
Just secondly that, so you're saying that the money we've spent so far obviously was, as you just said, that was to be recovered with sale or disposal. We still owe that money. We've spent that money. We've spent that money by borrowing that money. I mean, just logically, it would be a case where if it was incorporated back into the development of the Cape, then we'd write that off.
Well, you can write it off, but you still need to fund it from somewhere. So yeah, we're not a government. We can't just magically make, you know, funding decisions disappear. It needs to be funded from somewhere.
It's a bit like if you've got an overdraft. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it'd be nice just to wipe your overdraft off, but the bank won't let you do that, will they?
If you bankrupt yourself, you do.
It's probably a rather drastic solution.
Yeah, I don't think we'll go down that course. It'd be hard to prove just cause on that one. Just one very quick question. 2A1 says do nothing given the current environment. I thought the current environment would be quite encouraging. It's pretty bullish as far as section sales and so forth go. Can we have an explanation of what's meant here?
That was the total environment. I think it's also a reflection of workloads. I think, yeah, there is some land available, and it was just like, yeah, do nothing is always an option, and I think people would expect to see a do nothing option in any engagement. It's like it was really just to try and get what's the broadest range possible, put that to you, and then you can knock them off. And if you don't see those as appropriate, you've already done that with one. I think it's really the do nothing option. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It was absolutely should be a do nothing as an option, but yeah, it was just the other part. Anyway, we have noticed motions, Councillor Wallstein. So you want to move that?
Yes, I'll certainly. Thank you, Nick. Yes, I'd certainly move that, and just that's all. In the meantime, I'll get my right of reply later.
And second, Councillor McRoby. Okay, discussion, Councillor McRoby.
Yes, given the discussion just before on the do nothing, I wonder if the words past that, given the current environment, could just be deleted and just leave it as do nothing. Yeah. And if the mover was happy with that, I'd be happy with that as well.
Okay, mover and second are both happy with that, so we're just altering that one. Okay. Right, any further discussion? Councillor Kingham.
I think this is going to set off quite a debate. And I think it's got to be had. But I think it's important that we don't rush the thing, that it's all done really too quickly. Mrs. Julia's suggestion that it be over a reasonable period of time, I think is a good one. And I don't think we'll sell this until we know what the final figure is going to be. And if it's good enough, like Councillor Thompson, I'd be all for selling it. But unless we really know that, in order to find out, we've got to go through this whole process. Unfortunately, it's going to be time consuming and cause quite a bit of debate, but I think we've got to get on with it. That's why I'm happy that it's been moved accordingly.
I think I support Councillor King in there. I'm concerned about staff workload. I know with things like we've got the event centre, we've got all the discussion around future for local government, housing moving forward. There's so much spinning right now that I do worry about the timing, and I don't feel any need for this to be a fast process myself. But I take the point on the money that has been spent and the money that is to be spent on a lot of these projects we're talking about, and down at the harbour as well. So it's a good conversation to have with the community, and this for myself is the best way forward. It was really important that we actually talked to the community. Last time it was discussed properly, there was a lot of misinformation out there as to what part of the Cape we were talking about, how big it was. I think it's really important we front foot it with the right level of information and actually get the real steer from our community based on the facts as to what they do or don't want. And no matter what direction that goes in, it also gives us a move forward, whether it is let's plant the Cape out and let's do something with that area, or whether it is let's build on it. I think it is that this is, I guess the community feels really strongly about this piece of land, and it will be a pretty strong debate, and I'm sure we're going to get a huge amount of feedback on it. But I think that's a really good thing, and I just hope we're going to do it, don't speed it, don't rush through the process, do it right, and yeah, we'll see what our community has to say.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I was about to, sorry. Look, I think point number 3 under the recommendation kind of covers that off, and I think the parallel work that's being done, and even if we do slow it down, I'm quite happy with that, but we do need more information, and the parallel work that's able to be done might help determine that easily, but I don't think there's any rush, but it's on the agenda, so that's why I've supported it.
Councillor Williams.
Thanks. Yeah, just following on a little bit more from what Bill said, we do need to find out what the actual final figure may be that might make this worth our while. But my concern is that we're going to go through this and just having a vague idea of how the market is and everything. I mean, of course, it's a valuable piece of land, but we're going to go through a lot of work. What is the figure that is going to make us happy to move on? I have a feeling it's not going to be as huge as we think it is, especially once we soak in the $450,000 that's already been spent. So, you know, if people have got a pie in the sky figure in their head that we're going to come away with this with $5 million in our pockets, I think we need to be more realistic and make sure that we have sort of talked about what figure is going to be enough to move on to make it sort of worth our while putting our staff through this process. So that is my one concern that's sort of hanging over my head. I just don't think there's going to be as much in it as we think there is. It's a very complicated piece of land.
Yeah, I've already stated my view on the thing, and for me, for our staff to put in the time and resources needed to do this community engagement, is just taking away from their BAU, and option 3 is but I've already stated my view. I'm opposed to the sale or development of it under any consideration. I believe it should be put back on. All that, I said all that and no one heard it. Oh.
We will listen.
Disappointed.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor, do you want to repeat what you had to say?
I can't remember.
No. Basically, you said you're going to vote against. Councillor Thompson, did you want to say that?
I'm not quite as set in my process as my learned colleague. But I still come back that if we're going to engage with the community, we're engaging from a point of not being able to put all the information in front of them. Would the process not be better to seek expression what the land is worth, when we could then engage in a process of saying council could generate X amount of money from this, or we can leave it as is. But simply going out, tying up staff time in a process where we're not actually tabling all the information, I think is fraught.
I think, as we develop the information to go out, it may be that we decide here's a figure, here's a minimum figure, or something like that we could potentially put in there that this is what we want to realise. Particularly if we're going through a tender process, if we decide that we're going to sell it and we go through a tender process where there will be competition, there's potential to do something like that. Just in the same way that if we're going to decide to turn it into an extension of Cape Wombrau as a reserve, then there needs to be a figure against that. So I think we can certainly look at whether there's something in there which gives an indication. I mean, if someone came and said we'll give you $1 million, I mean, to me that just wouldn't be worthwhile. But it's to have a bit of a discussion about what we believe is worthwhile for council and its ratepayers. Councillor Holding.
Sorry, I know there's already a motion on the table, but just following on from Councillor Thompson's comments, what would the sort of cost be, expression of interest versus community consultation? Was that unanswerable?
I think going out for expressions of interest, you're not going to generate much interest from people if there's not. It's like, how much effort would you put in if you don't know there's actually any outcome at the end of it? Or whether there's any community support, or if you're trying to do a resource consent, you're going to get a whole lot of pushback. I think, look, we've thought about this. We would have made a different recommendation if we thought it was going to achieve a better result. Look, we think we've got a couple of fundamental questions in there, which is, what does the community want to do with this thing? We can add those out with numbers, but it's really, do you want to keep it as it is, turn it into a reserve, or actually turn it into, use it as residential property? We will flesh those out, but that's the question you're going to ask people. And dare I say, the numbers will have a little bit of an influence, but I think it's a very much a fundamental question that people are going to know one way or the other about what they think is the best use of that land for the community, for the benefit of Oamaru and the district. I think that's the question we want to ask, and then we'll just try and make that as clear as possible.
Okay. Councillors, so do you want to reply, Councillor Wallstein?
Yeah, just thank you everybody for your comments, and I think it just shows that it's going to be a topic that's going to promote a lot of discussion around the council table, but around the community in the time ahead. But I just think I take on board the comments regarding the value of the property, but really, you put the cart before the horse. We can't really go out and get indications of value until we have the community assent, community approval to actually deal with the property, other than what it is now. So it's a matter of what comes first, the cart or the horse. And I just think this is the option first, is to go to the community, find the community's views on what should be done with Forrester Heights. I know they'll be very, very varied, and there'll be some very strong views for both for and against. But then based on that, council can then decide whether to proceed or not. And if council does proceed, proceed on what basis? Whether options 1 to 6, which one of those options is most appropriate? But I think first of all, we need to actually front foot it with the public and keep the public informed, make sure that they're aware of what's going on, and we can't give an indication of value. But if public does give the approval to sell it or do something else with it, and then the value is not adequate, we as councillors, council can still say no, can still decline to do it and just leave it as it is in the meantime. But I just think, often central government blames local government for the housing problem if they're not making land available. So this is a chance that we can actually make some land available for housing, and should not be seen as being anti-development. But that depends again on the public's, the majority of the public's approval of something being done on that land. So I think in that case, this is the best way to go in the meantime. And then the next step in the chain is to see what the land is worth once, or if council is given public approval to continue with the process. So for that reason, I'm very pleased to move the recommendations and supported by Councillor McRoby. Thank you, Councillor McRoby, and leave it to councillors to decide their opinion.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I'm going to put it now. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we're a few minutes overdue for the morning tea break, so we'll just break, and if we can be back here in about 11, 12 minutes, at 10:45, that'll be great. Thank you very much.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hello. Test, test. Testing, testing.
Sorry.
Testing.
Righto, we're back into a thing, so welcome back, everybody. We now go on to item 5.3, the Cultural Facilities Development Project Funding on page 47, and just welcome Lisa Bailey, Toby and Chloe to the table. So Lisa, do you want to introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor Coacher. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the recent appointment of Ms. Searle here into the director role, unlike the acting role that this report still says. So Chloe's took that role on about 2 weeks ago and then had 2 weeks of annual leave. So she's first day back yesterday.
Yeah, congratulations, Chloe, from all of us. And we know you've carried out the job well in the acting role, and you'll do brilliantly in the full-on role. So congratulations.
And maybe just balancing one role for a while as opposed to 2 or 3. So it's fantastic. Okay, so first thing, this report signals the wrapping up of the Cultural Facilities Development Project 2020 for stage 1 of the museum, which is a really great outcome. And I think you'll agree it looks fantastic and it's been really well received by the community. So this paper now seeks approval for allocation of funds from bequests and special funds and the use of our unspent operational funds to the wrapping up of expenditure of the stage 1 part. And obviously resolutions are required for any use of bequest funds, which the detail in the report, and the use of carry forward funds now, which is a timing issue. And then lastly, this report's also about accessing the remaining already approved loan funding for the use of stage 2 for the Forest Gallery, so that we can also engage the services of a fundraiser to assist us with that as well. And finally, I'd just like to note that in the resolutions, resolution 1 and 2, it should actually say stage 1 as opposed to stage 2. This is effectively wrapping up stage 1 of both facilities. And we have Toby and Chloe here to answer any specific questions as we go through.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillors, got any questions? Councillor McRoby? Oh, no. No, everyone seems pretty happy. Okay, well, just ask Toby and Chloe, do either of you have any comment you want to make before we get into the motions?
Just that I'm very much looking forward to progressing the Gallery Stage 2 project, and I've already been scoping out some of the potential external funding options, and the conversations seem to indicate a relatively buoyant funding situation at the moment. So yeah, looking forward to being able to have some more concrete discussions as we get the information that's listed there for Stage 2.
Excellent. Councillor Tabendale.
Can I just move the 4 recommendations, please, with stage 1 rather than stage 2 on the first 2?
Certainly. And Councillor Percival, were you wanting to second that, or were you wanting to a question? Okay, I'll grab a seconder if we can, so we've got moved. Councillor Halaleli. So we'll take your question first before we speak to the motion, though, Councillor Percival.
Oops, Toby, you believe that you'll be able to do all this work within the budgets that you've put down?
Without getting putting the project to market, it's hard to gauge, especially in the way the market is at the moment, what the exact cost would be. But going through the preliminary stages could get a fair idea of what the total cost of the project would be.
The reason I ask is that there's no contingency in there for overruns or whatever. So you must be quite confident that you will.
Yeah, Grant did the costings on it, and he was pretty thorough with what he did. So yeah.
Thank you.
Right, speakers to the motion. Councillor Tabendale.
Just want to say it would be really great to get both of these projects over the line. There's been a lot of work done to date, and a lot of this is just it's a bit of a ticking box, if you will, exercise where they've had to come back to us to get approval for things that we've been aware of the whole way along. And yeah, really good to see it in front of us, and wishing the team best of luck if it goes through.
Councillor Wolfstein.
Thanks. Just a question regarding the museum bequests. The IM Pollard bequest is $11,000 out of a total of $76,000. So there's a lot of money left in that bequest still. Would that money then be available, following on the question from Councillor Percival regarding overruns, cost overruns, would that bequest then be available to perhaps meet any overruns that may be experienced?
Councillor Wolstein, certainly as we progress the project, we'll be looking at whatever special funds we have available and whether the conditions of those funds are applicable to that. This particular bequest, this portion of the Pollard bequest relates specifically to the museum and archive rather than the gallery, but the gallery does have special funds as well. So we're talking with the finance team and seeing what's available and making sure we're meeting the conditions that it was gifted for.
Okay. Well, I think I speak for all of us who say, this has been between the museum and the gallery, it's been a long ongoing project, or two projects, however we want to look at it. It has seen both facilities being closed for quite some time. And I think, the museum, obviously stage 2 is happening at the moment, and that's really exciting to have both that and the gallery done and finished, and to be able to have facilities that are going to be very accessible for all of the community, and be able to show off our taonga and our artworks and so forth would be great. So I wish you all the very best. Should this be approved, of course, today. But with that note, I'm going to put it, councillors, those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, that's carried. So, onward and upward, keep up the good work. Thank you very much. All right, councillors, we have got someone zooming in, I think, or joining us for the Wayland Lodge request. So that's going to be at 1:15. So we're going to go straight to 5.5, liquor ban for Loch Leard. Council, this is pretty straightforward. There's been ongoing meetings and so forth with the community and around Otamatata, and including law enforcement, etc. Quite happy to take motion. So Councillor Tavendale, you're moving, and seconded Councillor McRoby. I think it's pretty straightforward. We're aiming to make sure that we're keeping our young people safe, and this is one of the ways to try and do that. And I'm pleased to say we have good solid support from the police, who assure us that should the event just be moved somewhere else, that they will also follow that. So we will see how it all works out. Do you want to speak to that, Mr. Tavendale?
Just quickly, there's been a lot of options looked at, and it's been a bit of a tough one. Displacement is still a concern, but police believe that this will make it a lot easier to manage any issues. It's a really good option to just test this theory and to see how we go. Happy to support us doing that, and that way we can actually have a bit of a regroup afterwards and see what the results were, and if it was a theory that worked. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to put it, those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Right, moving on to 5.6, sorry, I should also just acknowledge Ahuriri Community Board Chair Vicky Munro, who's came down for that, and I'm sure this next item as well, very important, Dundroon toilet location. Another ongoing saga, I think, that's probably outlasted the Forester Gallery and Waitaki Museum. So, Mr. Hope, I'll hand over to you to lead off the discussion, who quickly points towards Mr. Van der Speck. Right.
Thank you. As the Mayor has alluded to, this has been an ongoing conversation with the community. Started a number of years ago when the preferred site was across the road on the green space, and Council went through a process to procure that land. That land is still very, very valuable as a green space, as there's not much other green space in the town of Dundroon. The Dundrum community were very proactive and have been very supportive of a project for a new toilet. And I guess that culminated through the long-term plan process where council received quite a number of submissions on the preferred site. So we've been working with that Dundrum community to try to, I guess, resolve a few concerns as far as their preferred site. They've really come to the party and are very supportive. They are offering the land to the council at a nominal $1 if council does cover the costs of the legal transactions and sale process. And the neighbouring landowner has also offered an easement to the council, which is necessary for us to use that site and service the toilets. So we've come to quite a good conclusion or resolution with that community. So we just need the resolution of council to, one, accept that as the preferred site, and to give the CE the delegation or the powers to negotiate those appropriate legal transactions.
Okay, councillors, any questions, first of all? Okay, well, someone like to move, Councillor McRoe?
Yeah, I have pleasure in moving this and getting this off the table. And just to let you know, when I drove past the site the other week, the pharmacy is gone. So you can now get a really clear picture of where this toilet's going to go. So well done to getting it to this point, and I have pleasure in moving it, both 1 and 2.
Yeah, as I went past there last night, noticed that was gone as well. So well done to the community for that prompt removal. Seconded by Councillor Tavendale. Okay, so discussion on it. Now that we have Councillor McRoby's motion on the table. Any discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kirch. I'd just like to say I think this has been a good process in terms of council listening to the community, taking on board very clearly the community's wishes, and finally agreeing to accede to those wishes. So I just think, in terms of the Dundrum community, well done for making their points of view, and well done to council for listening. So a good result.
Okay, anything else? Just note that, all through this process, there's been discussions around traffic in Dundrum, and that impacts where you put things and how you do things. And so I just want to reiterate what we've already said. We need to get on and deal with the traffic issues in Dundrum. I think that's an ongoing discussion with NZTA that we need to be having. But in the meantime, let's get the loo done and get that part of the picture sorted out. So I'm going to put it. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against, that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Van der Speck. Go build a loo. Right. Next, 5.7, the Support and Stimulus Fund Reconciliation Report, and we welcome Mr. Jared Quinn, whose report this is, and okay. We may have Helen Elgar joining as well, but Mr. Quinn, do you want to introduce the report?
Thank you very much, Mayor Kircher. And yes, Ms. Elgar is on the way. She was held up at a FENS meeting, but she will be here to talk to any questions that council may ask. So in summary about this, the Support and Stimulus Fund, I think that the fund has fulfilled its intent. It was right for the time. It was always intended to be a response to the pandemic situation, and then wound up so that the disaster fund could be replenished. The impact of the pandemic has been ameliorated, and existing services and funds can now serve the current conditions. So just to expand on that a little, there's no doubt that the economic and social performance of Waitaki were affected by the pandemic. The handbrake went on for a while in some sectors, especially those that were exposed to international visitation. And as in the case with any shock, some people were negatively impacted economically, socially, and in terms of their mental well-being. However, overall, we have come through the last 18 months with minimal disruption. So the projects funded by both the Community Resilience Fund and the Economic Resilience Fund were vital in supporting, for a start, those people impacted by the pandemic, maintain some social cohesion and a positive mental attitude amongst people in many groups in our communities. The projects funded by the Economic Resilience Fund were very effective at maintaining the profile of the district, promoting domestic visitation, which directly supported those businesses that were maximum affected, and provided downstream benefits to other local businesses, and jobs were sustained and created. So in my opinion, it has fulfilled its intent. Now, the SSF was established as a direct result of the pandemic, and the operating procedures approved by council required applicants to prove that it was connected to COVID. The intent was to limit the life of the fund, and that was contained in clause 3 and 4 of the operating procedures. So while acknowledging that there are residual impacts on mental health throughout the district, the current economic and social conditions have now reached a point where resolutions do not rely on funding from the Support and Stimulus Fund. Evidence of this is that the last awards from both the Community Resilience Fund and the Economic Resilience Fund were made in November 2020. So nothing currently suggests that there is any reason to review the intent of clauses 3 and 4 to wind up the fund, and therefore we can replenish the disaster fund.
Okay, councillors, questions, please. So we have the Mayoral Relief Fund, the Economic Resilience Fund, and the Community Resilience Fund. We also have the other funding, which was to provide employment to people affected by COVID, essentially. So we're talking about that one being closed as well. Is that correct?
Awards were made under each of the 3 provisions. There are employment contracts in place which will continue. The last one is scheduled to finish in January 2022. And there are 2 projects, one in Community Resilience Fund and one in Economic Resilience Fund, which are in their final stages. So of the money, we have about $10,000 yet to be made in progress payments to finalise those.
Okay, probably the only bit of feedback I'd give is with the redeployment fund. I believe that it's gone on for much longer than what was expected by councillors, and I think given the circumstances, if it was to be carried on almost 2 years after the fact, certainly over 18 months after the fact, I think those are decisions that should have come back to council. But what's been done has been done. Contracts have been entered into, and that's the case. So just make that comment to our new CE. Just there's something he's inherited, but you know, it wasn't. I don't think there was an intention by councillors that we increase. You know, we'll keep that running for quite so long as it has been. But I think I totally agree. It is time to wind this up and to basically put the remaining funds back into the disaster fund, and accordingly I'll move that we the recommendations there. Seconded, Councillor Tavendale. And do you want to speak to that? Are you a question? Yep, go for it.
I just picking up on your point from before, I wonder what the resolution that was actually passed by council at the time was. It'd be nice to be reminded of that at some stage, because yeah, I feel like there was timeframes put on things because it was quite a topic of conversation at the time.
Yeah, I think yeah, we can seek that information and just as part of an overall review that we could do. Any further comments? Okay, Councillor Wallstein.
Has it been seconded, Mayor Kircher? If not, I'm very happy to second it. I'm Councillor Tavendale, but okay, no, well, I just speak in support of it. I think it is time. It's served its purpose. Its course is run, and it's time to bring the matter to an end. So it was a good move at the right time.
Thank you very much. Okay, councillors, we'll put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you. Right, what are we on to next? The Upper and Lower Waitaki Water Zone Committee refresh report. We don't have anyone coming to speak to us for that, so we'll move on to those. So I'll just ask the governance advisor to speak to them.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, that's fine. This is an annual process whereby participating councils have a report through from ECAN. They have different appointments going through each year, so it's a bit like the council-controlled organisations that you appoint the refresher directors each year. So it's a similar process to that, and that process has happened, and this report is now going to all of the participating councils in order to get a resolution that would allow those new appointments to start in the current year. So it's just an annual normal report that comes through each time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, we don't have Councillor Hopkins here, who's our representative on Lower Waitaki Zone Committee, but we do have Councillor McRoby, who's on the Upper Waitaki Zone Committee. Do you have anything to add, Councillor McRoby? No, all good. Okay, moving the recommendation, Councillor McRoby, seconded Councillor Kingan, who's also had a bit of experience on zone committees. Do you want to speak to it? With your microphone.
Pretty briefly, I see there's no changes in the Upper Waitaki and a few refreshers in the Lower Waitaki. So that's all we're accepting, really.
Okay, right, nice and easy. We'll put it, those in favour say aye, and against, that's carried. Okay, moving on to ratification of council submissions. The first one on the exposure draft of the Natural and Built Environment Bill, and we welcome Victoria van der Speek and Mr. Hope again. So page 116 for the first one. Right, Mr. Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a slightly unusual procedure of ratifying something that's already been sent away. So it's one of those, it was good for the Crown gave councils and the public an opportunity to comment on essentially an exposure draft. It was just probably a bit disappointing about the time frame, which meant it sort of arrived, had to respond pretty quickly, both as a district and as two regions, which rolls into the second item. And really just wanted to acknowledge the work of Mrs. van der Speek of pulling something together that I think it really highlighted the main issues that council saw in this exposure draft, and hopefully these will be listened to when the bill itself is drafted and sent out for further engagement. So I'll just give Mrs. van der Speek an opportunity just to highlight a couple of things, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Hope. Good morning, all. So I guess the key points I just wanted to draw your attention to, just the significance of the resource management reform in New Zealand. This is the biggest since the late, the early 1990s when the whole RMA came out. And so there are a number of implications that this council will face with the change in legislation. And so therefore, our input is really important into this. And, we are one of a handful of TAs across the country who actually work within two regional councils. So that's quite a significant thing in relation to how this reform is going to play out. So these submissions probably can talk to both of them really similarly. Are on the Natural Built Environment Act exposure draft, which is still just a skeleton version of the final legislation. So we will have more chance early next year to input into the final versions. So yeah, we're just asking to council to formally ratify these, both the council submission and the Otago and Southland Council's regional submission to the exposure draft to the Natural and Built Environments Bill. Happy to take some questions if anyone has any.
Thank you very much, Mrs. van der Speek, and thank you for your very good work on this. First of all, comment from Councillor Tavendale.
Just a couple of things. First of all, that this went through a smaller group of councillors, myself, Councillor Hopkins and Mayor Critcher, just to have a look at it. It's obviously come to councils as well in workshop form, but it is really, really tough for us to deal with the timeframes appropriately. especially when this RMA process that's been looked into is such a massive change, and it's going to have massive implications, not just for our council, but for our community, and potential to erode ability to make our own decisions in our own community is quite massive on this. And this natural built environments portion of this, it's very hard to see how it ties in with all the other sections and how that's going to work together, and putting them out in 3 separate sections is probably making it very difficult for us to really understand the implications. Really appreciated Mrs. van der Spek's systematic kind of take on all the issues. It was really well covered through our submissions, I thought, and I think that could be seen that a lot of the points were then picked up and put into the regional submission. I think that's testament to the work that's done. And we just need to keep pushing and keep asking the right questions. But it's really important that we underline how important this review is to our community and keep an eye on it, because it's going to be pushed through faster than we know what to do with, to be fair. But thank you, Victoria, for your work.
Thank you, Councillor. Very good comments. Councillor Wallstein.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow on from Councillor Tevendale's comments. I think there's just such a huge amount of work, as you've said, Victoria, and well done for the work you've done. But for a body of work of that size, and to allow a period of 5th July to 4th of August for public submissions, it's almost trying to reduce the amount of public submissions by giving the least time possible. It's almost putting a clamp on public input into the bill rather than being able to really take your time to understand it. So well done on what you managed to do in this very short time available.
Okay. So I'd like to move we adopt that. Councillor Tevendale, Councillor Halalali, sorry. Right, any further comment? Okay, we'll put it. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against, that is carried. Now moving on to the next one, the ratification of the Otago and Southland Council submissions on the same bill. So Mrs. van der Spek, do you want to speak to those? Are there any differences to note, or any comments, please?
Thank you, Mia. So I guess this submission is a combined Otago and Southland Council submission. I think it'd be fair to say that it's slightly more high level than our council submission, but it definitely is very much in line with our thinking around the key submission points from a regional perspective. I don't have anything really extra to add at this point, unless there's any particular questions.
No questions, right? Councillor McRoe moved that one, and Councillor Percival second. Thank you. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, councillors, moving on. You're doing extremely well, I've got to say, time-wise. So moving on to 6.1, the Review of Burial and Cremation Act 1964, implications for Waitaki. No declarations of interest declared. Mr. van der Spek.
Thank you. So essentially the Burial and Cremation Act was last written in 1964. That basically covers off anything to do with council's operation of our cemeteries. The Department of General Affairs have been conducting a review of the Act, and they have run a consultation and submission process, of which a number of councils, including Waitaki, did make a submission. Essentially this memo just summarises the results of those submissions and the potential ramifications for council. They did note that there is further work to be done, particularly around the impacts on councils in terms of costs. And so basically, effectively, this is just updating you and providing that to you for your information.
Councillor Tevendale.
I just had a couple of questions on this. And first of all, I just wondered whether you've got any comment on the timeframes or expected timeframes from this information through to something actually being put into practice.
No, I don't. The only information available at this stage is they will do further work.
Thank you. Obviously, there's a lot of question as to whether or not they're going to respond to submissions and how it will respond to them. Probably just two questions I mainly had around what we're doing now. On page 152 for what could this mean for Waitaki, the requirement to maintain online burial records in a consistent manner. I feel like we've talked about that in the past. So probably two things. First of all, is that something we were planning on doing anyway as a council? And then the second point, where applications for burial on private land would need to be considered as a consent option. What are we actually doing around that kind of thing now?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as far as the first question, the online records, Council currently provides a service through our archives and the volunteers there. It has been our intention to develop a proper system, and that is a project that is on the list to be completed. What is unknown at the moment is what I guess their intention is as far as consistency. Are they looking for a consistent piece of software or methodology nationally, as opposed to at the moment each council has the option to determine its own process? With regard to the second one, there is provision in the Burial and Cremation Act for private burials in exceptional circumstances, generally around a lack of proximity to cemeteries. That doesn't typically apply in Waitaki, and to my knowledge, we've never had requests for that. So it would open up a whole new, I guess, process or can of worms that council would need to respond to.
Yeah, can I just tease that one out a little bit further, because that was a question of, in some countries throughout the world, you know, it's quite important to be able to bury yourself on your own property, if you like. So, and my question was kind of a bit the same. Can you do that here or can you not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as I said, only in very exceptional circumstances.
So further to that, what about the scattering of ashes and the like?
There's no legislative limitations as far as scattering of ashes, except for discharges potentially under the RMA to waterways. But at the moment, you can scatter your ashes on your land as you wish. Again, I'm not certain about the intentions of possible changes, but it does appear like there'd be more controls over where you can and can't discharge ashes in the future.
And one more, part of that report talks about the maintenance of headstones. I mean, it's a major thing in our district, and probably most districts. I mean, it's quite a scary thought, the costs of doing that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we are facing with this, that if, you know, currently it's the responsibility of families to look after headstones, and you potentially end up with two results. One is the cost of burial will need to be much greater so that you cover the future costs of maintenance, or else you are very limited to actually what headstones you can have. And the more rudimentary, the less issue there is. And I think if someone mentioned the other day going past the Waimate Cemetery, and the very basic headstones they've got there, and you know, it may be that you end up with that sort of thing, unfortunately. But yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges I see in this. Councillor Wallstein.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. Councillor King actually asked my question. I was going to ask that as well, but just to expand on that, Eric, you say responsibility for maintaining headstones. Is it just the headstone, or is it the whole grave site? Because some of the grave sites become rather dilapidated as well, for want of a better word.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would be the whole grave site.
And currently we don't do a lot there other than occasionally level ground and so forth.
Basically, most of our plots, so to speak, are grassed, so we do effectively maintain it by mowing. It's more the old cemetery where we have the old style concrete type areas, which currently are the responsibility of the families to maintain. But yes, council would need to pick up those responsibilities with these changes.
Okay. Mr. Hope.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that hasn't been discussed, but which could have quite some major implications, is the third last point, which is authorising cremations elsewhere than a crematorium. I assume that's included in there to allow for different cultural practices in terms of different cultural practices, but that will be I think far more of a challenge than actually interring someone in a location other than a recognised cemetery. That would present some real challenges to the planning team to come up with an option that's actually, I suppose, has widespread cultural acceptance.
The CEO did suggest that the sale of Viking ships might go up. I think there's a few people subscribe to that culture in different ways. Right, would someone like to move the recommendation, please? Councillor Tavendale, Councillor Kingan seconded that. Okay, without any further discussion, those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, that is carried. Okay, we now move on to 6.2, the freeholding of harbour leased land. Relatively brief, well, a very brief report to basically alert public to the fact that we were going to be discussing this. Mr. Hope, do you want to speak to this one?
No, I think this is sort of the practice we've adopted of at least highlighting to the public that this issue will be discussed, and it did prompt some comment in the public forum. But yeah, I can't really discuss terribly much about it. The discussion will take place later on.
Councillor Tavendale.
I guess just that based on the discussions of today, it'd be good to see the results of the discussion out in the public as soon as possible after that.
Yep. No, I agree. Right. Okay, someone like to move that we receive the information. Councillor McRoby and seconded Councillor Thompson. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, that's carried. We now have a situation where we've got through all of the public agenda items except for the Wayland Lodge one. We have people coming from Wayland Lodge Trust at 1:15, which is after lunch. So what I'm proposing is we go into public excluded now. We get through those items, and then we will come back live for the Wayland Lodge item at 1:15. So someone like to move that we go into public excluded. Councillor Thompson, second. Councillor Tavendale. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against, that's carried. Thank you very much. We'll just have a break while we change over.